Shield Pharma for giving me this opportunity to share my views about obesity and its association with polycystic ovarian syndrome. See, to look back into the history of PCOS, it was in 1935, Steen and Leventhal, they described the first appearance of a polycystic ovarian disease with the obese Persian girl with the hair upon her face and bumpy, lumpy ovaries. And they were totally anovulatory as well as infertile. Later on, the understanding about PCOD came historically. It was being classified as a reproductive disorder that was characterized by oligomenorrhea, hirsutism, and PCO morphology. Again, it was way back in 1983 to 85. I remember very well, even as a postgraduate, we used to do this bilateral resection of this enlarged ovaries as a therapeutic thing in normalizing the menstruation and promoting the fertility of the women. Hence, the disease, which was known as polycystic ovarian syndrome, it was classified as a disease. Later on, 30 years ago, it was first reported that women with polycystic ovarian disease had hyperinsulinemia. I remember that was about in 1989. The concept of PCO association with hyperinsulinemia was brought in, and current status we know. Research indicated that PCO is associated with the unique disorder of insulin action as well as defects in the insulin secretion, together with the abnormalities, confer a substantially increased risk of glucose intolerance. So, when coming to the epidemiology of PCOS, it is one of the most common endocrine disorders affecting the women of reproductive age group, seen in 8 to 11% of the reproductive age group women worldwide, and it is the most common cause of anovulatory infertility in women. And as usual, Indians rank the top. Indians have the highest prevalence rates in the world, 41% among the reproductive age group women. So, 95% of the people, the women who have hyperandrogenism in the form of hirsutism, it is mainly because of polycystic ovarian disease. 20% of all cases of amenorrhea are secondary to PCOS, and it accounts to 75% of all cases of ovulatory infertility. To know about PCOS, it's a multifaceted disease with a spectrum of manifestations affecting from adolescents to postmenopausal women. PCOS is associated with anovulation, obesity, hirsutism, and when the woman becomes pregnant, higher incidence of early pregnancy loss, higher chances of preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, and nearing perimenopause, or even a younger age group, the chances of endometrial malignancy is going to be 8-fold time higher. Globally, prevalence estimates that PCOS are highly variable. In some part of the globe, it is 2.2, but it can go up to 26% in other regions. The diagnosis of PCOS is based upon the 3 diagnostic criteria, of which Rotterdam criteria is very often taken into consideration. It was in National Institute of Health 1990. First, they included any 2 of the following, that is chronic convulsion, clinical biochemical evidence of hyperandrogenism, and polycystic ovaries in the ultrasound. Later in 2003, Rotterdam's criteria meant that any two that is either oligoovulation or clinical or biochemical signs of hyperandrogenism or polycystic appearing ovaries in the ultrasound, any 2 if it is present, they label the woman as polycystic ovarian syndrome. Again, Androgen Excess Society in 2006 also confirmed the same. That is, there should be a presence of ovarian dysfunction, oligoanovulation, polycystic appearing ovaries, and androgen excess. But this criteria fits in only for the adult PCOS. But in adolescent, all the 3 criteria should be present to say that the girl has got polycystic ovaries in adolescent age group. between obesity in PCOS. Globally, we know now obesity has become more than an epidemic. It has become a pandemic over the last half century. It is likely to be multifactorial and complex and go far beyond simple food abundance. It is not that the women, the individuals, they consume more of food, but there are so many other alterations in the lifestyle modifications due to lack of proper exercise, lack of household work, so many things, where the energy that is spent is being reduced, and the alteration in the food intake, all those things have contributed to obesity. And obesity accounts for a huge component of global healthcare and is associated with at least 50 obesity-related comorbidities, including polycystic ovarian disease.
Sorry, ma'am.
Global obesity, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is some disturbance which is coming, ma'am. Chitrakala, can you just help? Ma'am, there is some sound which is coming while you speak. Uh,
Okay,
continuously,
okay.
continuously it is coming. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. Chitrakala?
Yeah. Now I will restart just from this slide. You now tell me. Obesity accounts for a huge component of global ill health and is associated with at least 50 obesity-related
Yes, ma'am. It is fine,
comorbidities.
ma'am. It is fine now. It is fine.
Okay, including PCOS. Global obesity also confers a substantial socio-economical burden. Expenditure on obesity and the numerous equity accounts for substantial proportion of healthcare costs, which increases globally. Again, it is linked to abnormal function of HPO axis through multiple mechanisms that lead to PCOS. Obese women with PCOS, they have a higher incidence of metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, irregular menstrual cycles, clinical hyperandrogenism than lean women with PCOS. Obesity worsens both the reproductive and metabolic aspects of PCOS. So probably when you compare the obese, non-obese PCOS, the reproductive and metabolic aspects are slightly better in the lean group rather than in the obese PCOS group. There is also higher incidence of dyslipidemia, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and obstructive sleep apnea. Incidence of dyslipidemia also increases the increasing obesity. See, one more thing is the women who have obstructive sleep apnea are at a high risk of developing coronary artery disease at a later in life, much earlier than their normal counterparts. Again, most obesity related comorbidities associate with cardiometabolic dysfunction like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and other features of metabolic syndrome. Obesity related malignancies such as endometrial carcinoma are associated with underlying cardiometabolic dysfunction. We must also understand in polycystic ovarian disease, there is increased incidence of levels of pro-inflammatory factors like cytokines, tumor necrosis alpha, interleukins, etc. So these pro-inflammatory factors, again, they all increase the incidence of metabolic syndrome. So the insulin resistance, which is the basic for this particular syndrome, leads to increased reproductive abnormality, malignancies, hypertension, dyslipidemia, central obesity, macrovascular complications, and then hyperandrogenism. So once we correct the insulin resistance, most of them are likely to revert back. So what is the incidence of PCOS burden in India? In India, it ranges between 33.7 to 22.5%, with 9.1 to 36% of prevalence in adolescents only. Here, I would like to again say, it is not only the question of adolescents which they have a false appearance of PCOS, because many of the changes which occurs as physiologically during the adolescent period are mimicking adult PCOD. For example, the adolescents, they tend to have slightly obese, they are comparatively obese than that of the adolescents of yesteryears. Again, the appearance of the ovaries in adolescents are likely to be multicystic ovaries, which can be mistaken for a polycystic ovarian disease. Then initially, during the period of growth, there is increased levels of IGF, growth factor, which usually settles down once when growth factor is growth of the individual becomes flattened. But whereas in patients who are at a risk of developing polycystic ovarian disease, this insulin-like growth factor activity is continued, and that might lead to polycystic ovarian disease. In India, every 5 adults and 1 in 5 every adult suffers from PCOS. That means it's in adolescent, it is almost twice than that of the adult population. Studies in PCOS from India reported a prevalence rate of 37, even up to 62% for obese patients with PCOS. So again, there are a lot of prevalence studies to quote incidents like from Tamil Nadu, 126 girls were included, where the incidence was found to be 18%. This is among the adolescent, young adolescents. And again, Mumbai study showed the incidence is 22.5. Karnataka study among the medical college and dental college students show that it's 9.1. And again in Lucknow, it is 3.7. In Bengaluru, it is 9.13. In Chennai, it is found to be 6%. So these are all the incidents of PCOS in young girls. And what is again the link between obesity and PCOS? Majority of the women with PCOS are either overweight or obese. Data from Northern Finland birth cohort show a significant association between body mass index and features of PCOS at all ages. It is not only in the young girls, but it also in as they grow old, the BMI correlates with the features of PCOS. Modest weight loss, even around 5%, often results in clinically meaningful improvements in the reproductive, hyperandrogenic, and metabolic features of PCOS. So this is the linkage. You can see one side obesity, on the other side PCOS. So obesity will increase the insulin resistance. Again, it will increase the incidence of sleep apnea and adipokinin release. So once when these things are adipokinin release more, again it will promote insulin resistance. As a compensatory mechanism, this will lead to hyperinsulinemia, which has an effect upon the ovarian androgen production, ovarian dysfunction, and leading to PCOS. And again, insulin resistance will lead to metabolic dysfunction. So this is again androgen-mediated lipolysis, genetic factors, energy expenditure. All these things will be linked to obesity and PCOS. And most important thing is it is going to affect the mental and the emotional health of all the women suffering from PCOS. So the insulin resistance and fat distribution is one linkage, obstructive sleep apnea, steroidogenesis, adipokinins, and basically it has to be genetic factors that play a major role. So here again, all of us note how it acts at this insulin receptor level. There is impact P1-3 kinase activity at receptor level, which alters the serine phosphorylation, and there is still intact MAP kinase post-receptor insulin pathways. They form the central component of the PCOS pathogenesis and association of obesity with PCOS. This explanation also provides a rationale for the benefits of successful weight loss in obese and overweight women with PCOS. This improves insulin sensitivity, serum insulin levels, favorable impact on metabolic health, reproductive health, and hyperandrogenic features. So the basic is the increase in the weight gain or obesity or overweight is the cause for all this abnormal pathogenesis, what we see in PCOS. So once again, I have already explained the energy expenditure, that is very, very important. Again, physical inactivity. That is one reason why energy is not duly spent. And again, androgen-mediated lipolysis, which will increase the the ketones, everything, the ketogenic pathways again mediated, and mental health problems are there. So what are the symptoms of PCOS with obesity? Here, apart from infertility, because of the high level of androgens, there is increased body hair growth. They have trouble in losing the weight. It is not uncommon to see these young girls or young women saying that in spite of their exercise, in spite of the diet, everything they are not, they find it very difficult to lose their weight. Again, presence of multiple small ovarian cysts. They have low sexual drive, irregular menstruation, and hyperandrogenism, insulin resistance, fatigability, and mood swings. So now how to go about for the treatment of this PCO women? So the management is quite challenging. One thing is only symptomatic treatment is possible because still we do not know the root cause and hence the symptoms are only targeted. Infertility and hirsutism. Again, these are two of the major manifestations, but we know very well if you are going to treat hirsutism, all these girls will become anovulatory and infertility cannot be treated. For example, if you are going to put them on ocipil or anti-androgenic, they cannot, their fertility will not be returned. Hence, these symptoms have to be managed separately. Again, other management criteria is, I said earlier, this disease starts from womb and goes up to the tomb. So that means that each stage, at adolescent stage, they have one problem. During reproductive age group, they have infertility and obesity. And to perimenopausal period, they have the earlier onset of metabolic syndrome, and hence malignancies can also happen. So all these things have to be managed depending upon the symptom and what they require at that particular time of their age. So the management protocol changes during the lifetime of the patient. For example, in the long-term maintenance, if you come across, the insulin resistance has to be managed. It has to be managed with diet, exercise, lifestyle modification. But we do have certain good drugs like metformin, which can definitely reduce the insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia. Again, menstrual disorders can be corrected by oral contraceptive pills. And the third one is hirsutism can be managed with drugs like spironolactone, ciproterone, flutamide, finasteride, effervescent for a local thing, or cosmetic surgery can help these women. So the lifestyle changes are, first thing is diet, next one is exercise, third one is the pharmacological treatment, and fourth one is the bariatric surgery. Weight loss in the first line therapy in management of obese women in polycystic ovarian disease. Then what diet will you suggest them? They should be put on low calorie diet. Advise them to take, I will say, depending upon the BMI of the patient, the total calorie requirement can even go up to 1000 kilocalories per day. And again, it should be in the split form. Try to reduce the carb, try to increase the protein and minimize the fat intake, and replace everything with a soup, fruits, vegetables, and all those things. And enough of calcium and other micronutrients have to be taken. The most important micronutrient that will help in polycystic ovarian disease is selenium and chromium, which are gaining more popularity as a micronutrient in treatment of PCOS. And coming to exercise, how far they can exercise? Because even if the patient reduces the weight by even by 5%, then there are chances that ovulation can return and her metabolic system syndrome can revert to some extent. But there are certain anecdotal results that are seen with exercise. We should not advise these girls to go for excessive exercise. For example, more than 60 days per day is also not good. Less than 30 minutes per day is also not going to help. Optimum period is 30 to 60 minutes per day, because if they are going to exercise more, that is going to cause, again, amenorrhea. So ideal thing is ask them to go for a 60 minutes of exercise per day. So moderate exercise should be avoided, and that should be the message. Again, how to optimize fertility in women with PCOS. Again, here the first line is only weight loss, and as I have mentioned, just the weight loss by about 10% is going to improve the fertility outcome. Next line comes the insulin sensitizers. Insulin sensitizers commonly used one is like metformin, where it can be given especially in women who have got hyperinsulinemia. Then comes ovulation induction, and laparoscopic ovarian drilling should be the last one if they are resistant to ovulation induction. And then you can, if there is associated factor or failure of repeated ovulation induction, then they can be subjected to ART. So 5 to 10, coming to the weight loss, 5 to 10% can improve the insulin resistance, ovulation rate, pregnancy rate even if a BMI is greater than normal range. No consensus on commencement of infertility treatment on optimal BMI. That is, we can always advise the women that you must reduce her BMI before starting for fertility treatment. But what ASRM says is that BMI of less than 35 should be achieved before conception. The benefits of postponing pregnancy to achieve weight loss must be balanced against the risk of declining fertility with the advancing age. Again, the therapy, how do you treat anovulatory infertility? First is ovulation induction, either with clomiphene or second line with letrozole and gonadotropin. And now we all know that we prefer letrozole rather than clomiphene syndrome because of so many reasons, like we can reduce the multiple pregnancy, the anti-estrogenic effect at the level of endometrium and cervix can be overcome. Again, surgical, I will come to the myo-inositol sometime later. Surgical drilling, as I said, it is only second line. By this, multiple pregnancy can be avoided. Adjuvant therapy after drilling with clomiphene or letrozole will enhance the pregnancy rate, but you must understand that LOD does not, that is laparoscopic ovarian drilling, does not appear to improve the metabolic abnormalities. So nothing what we do for infertility is going to improve the metabolic syndrome. So coming to the medical management, again for the regularization of the cycle, combination pills are enough, or if the patient has got some form of, like when they cannot use estrogens, maybe they can put only on the progesterone, or mini pills can also be used. For ovulation induction, I have described earlier, letrozole, clomiphene, gonadotropin, metformin, etc. So again, what is the surgical management is, one thing is bariatric surgery. Does it play a role in management of PCOD? Yes, there is a limited role in subjecting these women for bariatric surgery just for weight loss. For example, if a woman has got a BMI of more than 35 with comorbid condition, without comorbid condition, they should be subjected for bariatric surgery. But even women with a BMI of 30 with comorbid condition, they can be subjected to bariatric surgery. But planning for bariatric surgery and counseling for bariatric surgery is very important, because unless they stick on to the food protocol, exercise protocol after bariatric surgery, there is no point in doing bariatric surgery. Again, we need to tell them, women who have undergone bariatric surgery, they have to wait for a period of 1.5 to 2 years before planning for pregnancy. Again, during this 1.5 to 2 years, they have to adapt some form of contraception, because following bariatric surgery, the chances for reduction in the metabolic syndrome and improvement in the fertility is very common, and hence they can become pregnant. If they become pregnant during this period of less than 1 year, then the chances of developing many complications like IUGR is going to be there, because the women have to get proper supplementation of micronutrients, and their body homeostasis has to get adjusted. Again, about laparoscopic ovarian drilling, as I have already mentioned, it should be kept as a last resort. If nothing works, then IVF can help them to achieve a full-term pregnancy. Then coming to the management of hyperandrogenism, hyperandrogenic symptoms can be very well treated with birth control pills, anti-androgen, especially the spironolactone containing birth control pills. COCs are very ideal, because the spironolactone has got both high anti-androgenic effect as well as it can reduce the weight to some extent. Gonadotropins are very rarely used, and insulin-lowering agents like metformin, eflornithine hydrochloride, which can be applied locally, and finally electrolysis. So now we have certain novel management strategies for obesity and PCOS. That is, effective weight loss implementation remains the most important, effective, promising management strategy for women with PCOS. But initially, maybe they are very much interested and they can reduce their weight, but sustainability is always a question. It is logical to develop future therapies that suppress appetite enhancement following initial weight loss. So peptide tyrosine is a potential future therapy for weight maintenance following initial weight loss. Correction of hyperepidemia is needed, and this should be the focus of future result. So evolution of PCOD, to summarize, there is genetic and environmental factors, and there is inositol deficiency, deranged insulin signaling, and there is pituitary dysfunction, enhanced ovarian androgen production, and development of insulin resistance. This is the cycle with which the PCOD goes. So let us come to how bioinositols and dichloroinositol play a major role in polycystic ovarian disease. Myoinositol is a stereoisomer of hexahydroxycyclanes that belongs to inositol family, which acts as an intracellular second messenger. It modulates a glucose metabolism and FSH signaling. Modulates steroidogenesis through non-insulin dependent pathways also. So mainly this steroidogenesis modulation, apart from the insulin pathway, it acts through the epimerase. So myoinositol treatment ameliorates insulin resistance and body weight and improves ovarian activity in PCO patients. See, dechironinositol alone can restore normal insulin activity in classic insulin target tissues such as liver and muscle, reducing the circulating insulin levels. Enhancement of ovulatory frequency with dechironinositol could be ascribed to the overall improvement in the insulin sensitivity and reduction in the circulating insulin and androgen level rather than dechironinositol acting upon the ovary. So it mainly acts at the peripheral level upon the liver and the muscle. Now coming to epimerase enzyme, which is the basic thing that helps in conversion of dechironinositol to myoinositol to dechironinositol. This is under insulin control. In type 2 diabetic patient, there is reduced tissue insulin sensitivity that leads to decreased epimerase activity and hence down-regulates DCA synthesis. So understand very clearly, in type 2 diabetes, the epimerase enzyme fails to act properly. So the conversion of myoinositol to dechironinositol fails. At the periphery, there is shortage of dechironinositol that will have hyperinsulinemia and that will cause hyperinsulinemia. This epimerase can act only this way, from myoinositol to dechironinositol, and not the reverse mechanism. So the deficiency of DCA at the peripheral level due to reduced epimerase, what are the things that happens? So decreased DCA concentration and bioactive DCA IPG release will contribute to insulin resistance, and this insulin resistance in turn will cause hyperinsulinemia and metabolic disorders, and that will also lead to hyperandrogenism, acne, and hirsutism. So all the peripheral manifestations of PCOS is because of DCA deficiency. Then coming to deficiency of myoinositol, which usually occurs in the ovary, that can lead to infertility. What happens in PCO patients is there is enhanced myoinositol to DCA epimerization in the ovary, leading to increased DCA and myoinositol ratio. So there is deficiency of myoinositol in the ovary. You go back to this. So what happens is there is depression of reduction of myoinositol, but whereas there is DCA formation is more. So whenever myoinositol is reduced in the ovary, this will lead to oocyte maturation arrest, oligo-ovulation, anovulation, and infertility. So myoinositol supplementation requires to improve the oocyte quality in infertile PCO patients. So again, the rationale of using combination of myoinositol and DCA in infertile PCO patients are, each one, myoinositol will act at the ovarian level, whereas the DCA will act at the peripheral level, improves the insulin resistance and reduce the insulin sensitivity and reduce the insulin resistance, leading to maintaining the normal insulin level. So the myoinositol deficiency, when it is supplemented at the ovarian level, it can yield a better oocyte quality because the normal insulin level will reduce androgen level at the ovary. So when the intra-ovarian androgen level is reduced, it can produce better oocyte quality and promote ovulation. So ultimately, it increases the chances of fertility. To repeat again, it is a combination of myoinositol with DCA that is needed to improve the fertility and ovulation. there are so many clinical supports to say that inositol versus metformin administration in PCOS, 128 patients were enrolled, 62 patients in group A prescribed only, only 2 grams of myoinositol with 50 grams of DCA. 66 patients in group B were prescribed only metformin for 3 months. The results are spontaneous menstruation was higher in group A than group B, 46% versus 13.6. Again, pregnancy rates were 11 versus 3 in metformin group, and weight loss was also significantly more in inositol group. So that shows that myoinositol with DCA combination gives a better result than metformin alone. Weight loss is there, spontaneous menstruation is there, increased pregnancy rate is there. So this is the conclusion what they have come to. Again, another 50 patients, young patients, how whether it can prevent the cutaneous disorders, they were enrolled. Myoinositol 2 groups, 2 grams twice daily for 6 months. BMI, LH, FSH, insulin, HOMO index, androstenedione, testosterone and free testosterone, acne and hirsutism were evaluated. The result was plasma LH, testosterone, free testosterone, insulin, HOMO index, everything significantly reduced after 3 months. There was no change in the plasma FSH and androstenedione level. Both hirsutism and acne decreased after 6 months. We should always tell the patient planning for treatment for hirsutism, they will take minimum period of 6 months to show the improvement at the peripheral level. So this was the same thing, except the FSH level and the androstenedione level. There is definite reduction in LH and testosterone, free testosterone, basal insulin level and HOMO index in women who were treated with MCA and DCA combination. So this found to be very effective in reducing the hirsutism and metabolic syndrome. Again, endocrine clinical effects of myoinositol administration in PCA. 50 overweight patients were enrolled, divided into A and B groups. 25 treated with myoinositol and folic acid, and other 25 treated only with the folic acid for a period of 12 weeks. Again, the results were plasma LH, prolactin T, insulin levels are significantly reduced. The insulin to glucose ratio, HOMO index improved. Menstrual cyclicity was restored in all amenorrheic and oligomenoric subjects. No change occurred in the group B, which was treated only with the folic acid. This is the grammatic representation of the infants. So in conclusion, myo administration improves reproductive access, functioning PCO patients, reducing hyperinsulinic state that affect the that affects the LH secretion. So combined therapy of DCI, MI in a physiological ratio also reduces the cardiovascular risk by improving the lipid profile in PCO patients. So 20 obese patients were enrolled. Combination of MI with DCI was given twice daily for 6 months. The outcome was total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglyceride, HOMO insulin, HOMO IR before and after 6 months. They were found to have a better profile with the combination, and hence there is definitely a marked change in the reversal of this metabolic syndrome. So metabolic profile can be improved in PCOS women with reducing the cardiovascular risk. Again, in 56 PCOS patients, each group, 8 groups, they were divided, and they wanted to find out which proportion of MI with DCI will be ideal. And they tried all combinations, and finally they found out that 40:1 of MI with DCI ratio is the best for PCOS therapy, aiming at restoring the ovulation in this patient. Increase in progesterone level, sex hormone binding globulin, reduction in 17-beta-estradiol, free testosterone, basal and postprandial insulin levels are more significantly seen with this combination of 40:1 compared to other ratio. And this is the grammatical pictorial representation of the progesterone levels, sex hormone binding levels, which have reduced in combination therapy. Again, what is the role for micronutrients? Now we are so much about supplementation of micronutrients prior to treatment of infertile patients, especially PCOS, and we know that highest myoinositol, dihydroinositol supplementation, ubiquinol, L-methylfolate, chromium, selenium, and vitamin D. All these micronutrients are helpful in promoting fertility in PCOS. To conclude, and what should be the future direction, weight gain and obesity are 2 important risk factors for clinical and biochemical manifestation of PCOS in a woman who is genetically predisposed. Association is more complex and includes complicated interlinks between multiple factors through indirect mechanism. Depression and perceived lack of self-control and increased distress can be there, and that will again depressed patients are likely to suffer from bulimia, and also they have eating disorders which will also aggravate obesity. This may hamper ongoing attempts at lifestyle changes and therefore effective weight loss. It is likely that overall prevalence of PCOS will continue to increase in near future because we see a lot of young women with young girls with obesity. PCOS often manifests during adolescence and starts in utero. We need to recognize the plight of these women and girls with PCOS and the complexity of this pathogenesis. Manage these patients with sensitivity and empathy while also pursuing a proactive approach, particularly important in given the stigmatization of their mental ill health. Adapt a holistic way of weight management to the PCOS. Generally, what advises you encourage these young girls or young women who come with overweight, tell them individualize the protocol of diet, exercise pattern, and then you encourage with some amount of this oral anti-obesity drugs like sibutramine can also be given, a combination of this like this what we call it as in Tamil pattai, that cinnamon, that is also found to be very effective in weight loss, and encourage them if they reduce the weight by 1 or 2 kgs per month, you encourage them, so that will be a give them a moral boost that will improve them to improve more and more of reduction in the weight. Often then we can hope to convert typical this vicious cycle of weight gain and worsen features of PCOS into a liberated virtuous cycle of effective weight loss and eventual freedom from the shackles of PCOS. Inositols are found to be helpful in correcting most of the changes in PCOS like weight gain. It is supposed to improve the metabolic profile, correct anovulation, correct the peripheral cutaneous manifestations of hyperandrogenism. So this is a nutraceutical drug which can help in PCOS in various PCOS with various manifestations. I thank you for the opportunity given to me. I thank Shield for giving this opportunity to share my experience with this drugs in management of obesity and management of polycystic ovarian disease. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Prachi here from Shield. It was an excellent presentation and you covered all the points very well. It was a very nice data and thanks a lot. We will wait for the questions and I will read out those questions to you. And then we will have a Q&A session. Balaji sir, do you want to say something?
I want to thank Dr. Ramani Devi madam for sparing her time and making a wonderful presentation. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ban. Thank you, Mr. Balaji. Thank you.
Thanks, madam. Thanks, madam.
There is a congratulatory words from Dr. Praveen Kumar, and the presentation was very wonderful. That's the comment. So thank you, ma'am. There is a question about the management of lean PCOS women. Ma'am, you have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Okay. Lean PCOS patients also, they have, it's not that obesity is the only link because 80% of the patients with PCOS are obese, but rather 20% are lean PCOS. So again, they have to, they may be thin, they may be on the lower weight side, but you must always compare the bone weight and the fat rather than the body mass index. We should find out the fat index in that particular person. So that is very, very important, because increased adipogenicity exists not only in obese PCOS but also in lean PCOS. Hence they also need to go for a proper lifestyle modification, proper diet and proper exercise. Maybe they have to increase the muscle mass and reduce the fat index of the body.
Right, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Chitra Shankar, do you want to post any question? Only role is mentioned over here. Yes, the next question is, do inositol have, do inositol
Share must be share a tile in young lean
young
PCOS.
lean PCOS with only irregular periods and not desiring fertility?
Yes, we can use inositol even in young lean PCOS because, as I said, the lean PCO patients are also having problems of metabolic syndrome. It is not only the obese one. So that can be reverted with this inositol. To tell you the fact, not only PCO patients suffering from patients suffering from PCOS, even a simple diabetic patient, type 2 diabetes, can also revert their metabolic syndrome by supplementing inositol, because that is the deficiency that is seen even in type 2 diabetes. So it can be safely given for lean PCOS also.
Yes, so that was the next question, role of inositol in lean PCOS, which you have already answered. Thank you, ma'am.
So how long can we continue the inositol? That is $1 million question, because the drug is slightly expensive. So probably for a period of 6 months or even 1 year, we can supplement till she finds some improvement in the ovulation and she becomes pregnant, or she has a reversal of some amount of this metabolic syndrome.
Right, ma'am. Thank you very much. If there are any more questions, kindly post your questions in the chat box, dear doctors.
There are no more.
Yes, ma'am. So there are no more questions. So thank you very much, ma'am, for this. Yes, can inositol use for only obesity? So actually, you have answered, but again, the same question has come.
Only for obesity, I don't think we should need to use. We need to use inositol in the absence of other metabolic problems. Only obesity, I think she has to get it corrected only with diet, drug, and exercise and lifestyle modification. And one more question: can we continue inositol if she becomes pregnant? Usually, we stop when she becomes pregnant. We don't continue to give inositols. Okay. Chitrakala, what shall we do?
Yes, ma'am. I can see there are no more questions.
No more
Yeah, doctors are posting
questions.
that
Okay.
presentation was good. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and of such a beautiful and wonderful talk, beautiful data. So it's really an honor to have you as a speaker on Shell Connect platform. So thank you, heartfelt thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your time and this presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the people who have logged in. Thank you, Shield.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, doctors, for joining this webinar. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.